Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at something our sources call the American economic anomaly.
Right.
I mean, if you've ever watched the news and just wondered, how can the U.S. have this $34 trillion national debt, a debt that would just crush any other country?
Mm.
Well, this deep dive is going to show you the mechanism that makes it all possible.
It's not really an anomaly, though, is it? It's a system, one that's been, carefully built over the last 80 years.
Engineered.
Exactly. The U.S. hasn't just been playing the game. It wrote the rules.
Yeah.
And it benefits from them in a way that, well, it lets them write bad checks forever, knowing someone else has to cash them.
So that's our mission today. We're going to unpack what is maybe the single greatest financial heist in history.
The pivot.
The pivot from the gold standard to the petrodollar system. This move that created a permanent artificial global demand for the U.S. dollar.
There's a great analogy in the source material for this. Imagine you're in a high-stakes poker game. It's the whole world at the table. And you're playing with real chips, real value, but the player across the table, the U.S., when they run out of chips, they just write $1 million on a napkin, slide it to the dealer.
And the dealer has to accept it.
The dealer has to accept it. That's the unfair advantage we're dissecting.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
The promise. The one that was made and then, well, completely broken.
Yeah.
We have to go back to 1944.
Right. End of World War II. Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Europe's in ruins, but the U.S. is booming. And more importantly, it holds 2/3 of all the gold in the world.
2/3. That's an incredible amount of leverage.
It's everything. So when 44 nations get together to figure out the new financial system, the U.S. makes an offer you just can't refuse.
Which was?
The dollar becomes the world's reserve currency, and we promise that every single dollar is backed by gold. You can trade it in any time, $35 for an ounce of gold. It was, as good as gold.
And this is where that phrase, the exorbitant privilege, comes from. This is where the cheat code really starts.
Absolutely. Because now if you're, say, Brazil, and you want to buy oil, you need dollars. How do you get dollars?
You have to sell something to the U.S., coffee, beef, whatever.
You have to sell real goods for our paper. But if the U.S. wants to buy that Brazilian coffee,
We just print the money. We don't have to produce anything for
they
it.
run a printing press. They run factories. That was the deal. The problem is the U.S. quickly started spending, as the sources put it, like a drunken sailor.
Vietnam War, major social program.
Both at once. And pretty soon we had printed way more dollars than we had gold in the vault to back them up. The whole system was running on faith.
And that faith eventually ran out. I know France, in particular, got suspicious.
They did. They saw the printing presses going nonstop and basically called our bluff. They said, okay, we'd like our gold now, tweeze.
Which brings us to August 15, 1971, the Nixon shock.
Nixon gets on TV and announces he is temporarily suspending the ability to convert dollars into gold.
Temporarily.
Of course. That temporary suspension is now over 50 years old. It was permanent. The dollar was now backed by, well, nothing but a broken promise.
In a normal world, the dollar should have collapsed right then and there. Why didn't it?
Because the entire global economy was held hostage. Every trade contract, all the central bank reserves, it was all in dollars already. There was no plan B.
It's like you're all on a plane and the pilot just bailed out, but you can't leave because you're at 30,000 feet.
Perfect analogy. And this is where you get that. It's the gangster economic quote of all time from Nixon's Treasury Secretary, John Connolly.
He's talking to European finance ministers, right?
Yes. And he just looks at them and says, the dollar is our currency, but it's your problem.
Let's unpack that because it's brutal. It means if we print too much money and cause inflation,
It becomes their problem to deal with. They have to hold our devaluing paper because they need it for trade. We basically started exporting our inflation. But this created a huge vulnerability. The dollar needed a new anchor, and fast.
and this leads us to the great pivot. The genius move that saved the dollar. Switching its backing from gold to oil.
Precisely. We're in 1974. The U.S. is in a terrible spot. Stagflation, high inflation, slow growth. The OPEC oil embargo has shocked the system. The dollar is weak.
So they need a new reason for the world to demand dollars, a non-negotiable reason.
Right. So Henry Kissinger, Secretary of State, gets on a plane and flies to Saudi Arabia for a secret meeting.
And what was the deal he put on the table?
The sources call it a mafia protection racket, and that's pretty accurate. It was a simple two-part deal.
Okay, part one.
Part one, the U.S. offers Saudi Arabia absolute ironclad military protection. We'll sell you our best weapons. We'll park the U.S. Navy off your coast. We'll guarantee no one ever messes with your oil fields, ever.
Total security. And in exchange for that, the catch.
The catch was you must price every single barrel of oil you sell to anyone in the world exclusively in US dollars.
Wow. Not yen, not marks.
Not gold, only dollars. So now, if Japan or Germany wants to buy the energy they need to survive, they first have to get their hands on US dollars. It created an instant, permanent global demand.
And you said there was a second part to the agreement.
Yes, and this is the part that really locks the system in place. The Saudis, with these billions and billions of oil dollars or petrodollars,
What do they do with them?
they had to agree to invest them or recycle them back into the U.S., primarily by buying U.S. Treasury bonds, U.S. government debt.
So they sell oil for dollars and then lend those same dollars right back to the U.S. government.
It's a perfect self-sustaining loop. The world buys oil, which creates demand for dollars. Those dollars are then used to buy U.S. debt, which funds the U.S. government and the very military that is protecting the Saudis. It's a masterstroke.
Was there any debate back then about the long-term cost? I mean, we were basically committing our military to this permanent security role in the Middle East.
The need to save the dollar was so urgent, it seems like any long-term concerns were just pushed aside. A collapsing dollar was seen as the far greater threat. And this deal created a guaranteed massive buyer for U.S. debt, which is a luxury no other country has.
Okay, let's talk about the effects of that, the permanent artificial demand. How does that allow the U.S. to run a $34 trillion debt?
Any other country with a debt-to-GDP ratio like the U.S. would be facing default. But we don't. Why? Because every country on Earth needs oil. To get oil, they need dollars.
And the safest way for them to hold all those dollars is to buy U.S. Treasury bonds.
You got it. They're basically lending us money so they can have the currency they need to buy essential energy from a third party. They're trading their real goods, their cars, their electronics for our digital IOUs.
And that keeps our borrowing costs incredibly low.
Rock bottom. It lets us run these huge deficits without the normal consequences. And it's also how we export inflation.
Explain that.
When the Fed prints trillions of new dollars, yes, it causes some inflation at home, but a huge chunk of that devaluation is absorbed by the rest of the world that's forced to hold those dollars.
So we get the cheap TVs and cars.
And they get to hold our devaluing paper. It's like a hidden tax on the entire global economy that helps pay for our standard of living.
But what happens if a country tries to get out of this system? The sources suggest there's a pretty quick find-out phase.
The phrase used is, you don't mess with the money supply. And the examples are stark.
Like Iraq.
Exactly. In 2000, Saddam Hussein announces he's going to start selling Iraqi oil in euros, not dollars. A direct challenge. A few years later, the U.S. invades. And one of the first things that happens after the regime change.
And Iraqi oil sales go right back to being priced in dollars.
Right back to dollars. Or look at Libya in 2011. Muammar Gaddafi was pushing for a gold-backed African currency, a gold dinar, to sell African oil.
Bypassing the dollar completely.
Bypassing the dollar and the euro. And soon after, you get a NATO intervention, and Gaddafi is gone. The message is pretty clear. The U.S. military is the enforcer for the petrodollar system.
That system has been dominant for, 50 years now? But things are changing. We're now seeing cracks in the code.
We are. The threat today isn't really a single country. It's a coordinated bloc. It's the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
What are they doing?
They are actively and openly trying to build an alternative system, a way to trade with each other without ever having to touch a U.S. dollar.
What are the actual mechanics?
Two main ways. First, they're doing more bilateral trade in their own currencies. So China buys Russian oil in yuan, India buys Brazilian goods in rupees, they just cut the dollar out.
Right.
Second, they're building their own payment infrastructure, like China's CIPS system, as an alternative to the U.S.-controlled SWIFT system. That stops the U.S. from being able to use sanctions as effectively.
But is that really a viable threat? I mean, the yuan is not exactly a stable, trusted reserve currency.
It's not about replacing the dollar overnight. It's about making it less necessary. Think of it as a slow bleed, not a sudden collapse. Every single trade that happens outside the dollar system, well, that's a small chip away at that artificial demand we've been talking about.
And this is what leads to the endgame scenario that has economists worried. What happens if that artificial demand really starts to dry up?
Then the exorbitant privilege is over. We lose the ability to export our inflation. If the world stops buying our debt, interest rates here would have to skyrocket to attract buyers.
Which would mean
What?
for the average person?
It would mean the cost of the national debt becomes unbearable. It would force massive, painful cuts to government spending, or it could trigger a huge financial crisis. We'd have to switch from creative mode, just printing money, to survival mode, playing by the same rules as everyone else.
So to wrap this all up, the core takeaway here is that the U.S. dollar's power today isn't really about gold or even our economic output.
No, it rests on that deal from 1974, a deal that tied the world's need for energy directly to a need for our currency.
It's given the U.S. an incredible 80-year run on what the sources call easy mode.
An absolute masterstroke of geopolitics and economics, it has underwritten American power for half a century.
It really reframes everything you think you know about global power.
It does, but, history shows no empire lasts forever, no currency stays on top forever, and the pressure is building.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a final thought. The big question isn't if this economic cheat code will stop working. The real question is when. When does it get patched? And more importantly, what happens to a system that has become totally addicted to easy wins when it suddenly, finally, has to play fair?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you next time.